Hey viewers, my name's Cara. I'm your host for Tuesdays on the Pagan Perspective, and this week we're talking about wands and athames. This week's topic was just the usage of wands and athames. There was no specific question involved with that. It's just kind of an open-ended topic. So we're talking about wands and athames, and I am confident that we will have some different views on all of these things throughout the week, because I know that some people on the team use them more than others. Some people don't use them at all. Some people use different tools that are similar to that, and this is including among the subs too. So not all of those views will be shown this week, but I'm sure you can always ask people about it separately, or they'd be willing to answer any questions for you. So we've made videos about this in the past at some point, but it was a long time ago, and I may have mentioned it on my personal channel as well, but I recall saying in videos before that I don't really use wands and athames as such. But what I'll do in this video today is talk a bit about what I know they're used for and what they would be used for in a practice similar to mine, and then how I would use them if I were to use them and why I don't typically. So wands and athames are actually interesting in that in some traditions they're interchangeable. Or I guess what I mean to say is in one tradition, one has a certain job and the other has another job, and in another tradition, those jobs might be switched. So in some traditions, the wand is associated with air and the blade, or athame, is associated with fire, and in other systems, the wand is associated with fire and the blade is associated with air. That is the association that you see within the tarot, in the suits of the minor arcana of tarot. That's how they are used. Wands or staves or rods or staffs, or however you think of them, are associated with fire in that sense, and blades, swords, things like that are air. And when we go by those meanings, blades are about intellect. They're about slicing through decision making, cutting through the fog, the mental fog. So they're associated with mental capacities, and I always think decision making because that's my big thing, and focus and intellect. And wands are associated with fire because they can be made into torches. They're typically wood. They're made of branch, which is something that you can use to build a fire. They're also associated with the sun because, of course, the sun makes plants grow. So I believe that's how it comes about to be about fire. So those things are about passion and energy. Now in my practice, from the time that I was like 12 or whatever, I didn't really understand those associations, and I was not a student of the tarot. So I sort of came up with my own associations, and to me, it made more sense for blades to be fire because metal blades are forged in fire, and it made sense for me for wands, typically made of wood, to be air because branches sway in the breeze and are really closely associated. When you think of trees and plants, they're associated to wind or with wind. So there are different ways that you could look at it depending on your practice, depending on your views. Those are two main ways that I've seen them used and associated. As for actually using them as tools, both or either of them or neither of them are used for typically casting circle, anything that you have to use directing of energy for. They are used symbolically. Blades are often a symbol of the masculine, and cups are a symbol of the feminine. And that's true in the tarot associations too, right? Blades and wands, or rods or staves, or whatever you call them, swords and the other, are both associated with the masculine. They're both projective forces, whereas cups and pentacles, or coins, or whatever they are in the specific system that you're talking about, are both feminine receptive energies. So wands or blades can be used for projecting energy, directing energy. Practically speaking, that might be used for casting a circle or any number of things like that. And I think that's another reason why I never really got into using them, because I couldn't really figure out for myself, well, when would I use this one and when would I use the other one, and why should it matter to me? I have been in circles that have been cast with a sword. I have been in circles that have been cast with a wand. They're just tools for projecting energy, and I think whatever works best for you is going to work best because it's all about your energy and what gets it out there for you. I have sometimes used my wand, which the wand that I have is bamboo wood with a crystal in the points. It was a gift from my mother, and that's really the only one I have. I've been very attracted to some crystal wands that I've seen over the years, and I might get one eventually, and I feel like if I had something that really, to me, had a lot of symbolism in it, or maybe if I make one down the line, something that has a lot of symbolism in it that feels like the right size and the right weight, and, that it evokes something from within me, then I feel like that would be a really awesome tool because you feel a lot more energy flowing with that. Currently, I don't have a huge attachment to my bamboo wand. I just think it's pretty, so I don't really use it on a regular basis. I use just my hands. I just use what I have on my body, fingers, hands, everything like that. And the only time I have used a blade in my practice is really just in a practical sense, like in a kitchen witch type sense, to cut things that I was using for ritual. Now, you may have read, especially if you're toward the beginning or if you're in specific traditions that make these distinctions. When I started studying, I was studying Wicca specifically, so a lot of what I read was about how Athames or Athames, but however you pronounce it, it doesn't rhyme with flame or a-frame. I say Athame. It always described Athames as being the double-edged blades, typically with a black handle, and they are for ritual direction of energy only, and cutting a door in your circle and things like that, which, again, isn't something that I typically have to do. I do things a little bit differently, so that's not always necessary, but I've been in circles where that's the case. And they are never used to cut anything physical. That's usually how they're described. They are a ritual blade only for energy purposes. They are not for physical cutting. So really they should have a dull blade because you're never going to use them to cut anything physical anyway. And then there's typically a single-edged knife with a white handle, is what some people prefer, called a bowline, which is what you would use to actually cut your cords, cut your herbs, cut your food for your cakes and ale, whatever it's going to be. Any spell that you're doing that requires actual cutting, you would use this separate white-handled knife. So you'd have this black and white, and they're balanced, right? And the double edge on the Athame also represents duality of God and goddess, masculine, feminine, as above, so below, all of that. So there's really a lot of symbolism packed into these things. However, a lot of people who don't go with the really traditional symbolism like that, or especially people who identify as kitchen witches or hedge witches, like to use things that are just your everyday items for magical purposes. So you might actually use a knife from your kitchen to do your ritual cutting, and throughout your life you would also use that knife in the kitchen to prepare your food on a daily basis, really incorporating your magical tools into your entire life and sort of integrating that it's not just, your spirituality is not just separate and reserved for ritual, but it's throughout your entire life. So some people like to do things like that to associate the integration of their spirituality for them. Other people really do like to keep them separate. Both ways are valid. I tend to lean more toward the using what I have. So whenever I'm doing a spell and I just need to cut something, I would use any of the scissors that I would normally use on a daily basis in my home. If I want it to be really special, or if it's like if I'm cutting food for ritual to use in my feast, that's when I might use a pocket knife that was given to me that is made of some kind of wood handle, and it has a deer carved on it, which is symbolic to me. So sometimes I use that. I think I've used it in one major ritual ever. So that's the only blade that I really have that I've ever used for ritual purposes, and I also have a set of letter openers that look like gold-handled swords. So that is another thing that I might use, and I have used that for ritual cutting of things sometimes. But as far as directing energy goes, I've never used them for that because they're very small. They're not really the typical wand size where you kind of hold on to it and can brandish it. But yeah, the only reason that I would use those types of things would be for directing energy. There was also some practical things where if you are doing a cleansing with salt water, you might have your chalice, goblet, cup, whatever you have as your receptive energy with your water in it. And I've seen some people use a ritual blade to symbolize the projective force and the masculine force to pick up the salt to then put into the water and actually stir it with the blade. I've also seen, of course, the blade and the chalice being used to represent the union of opposites in a symbolic great rite, which isn't something everyone does, but I've seen those things done with blades and cups as well. Typically those aren't things that I do on a regular basis, so it doesn't really fit into my everyday practice, but for like big Sabbath rituals and specific rituals that I've gone to, those have been some involved symbolism. I also just am not super comfortable with blades in general, especially when I was younger. I had a lot of issues around sharp things, I'll say, and I think I've gotten better at that over the years, or better with that. But that was just another reason why I just wasn't that interested in working with blades or carrying blades. I know some people love to collect them, like people love sharp, shiny things, and that's cool. So if that's something that appeals to you, appeals to your practice, appeals to the way that your energy flows, then those are some things that you can use. They don't happen to be a huge part of my practice. I kind of do what I do with other things. I feel like there was one more thing I wanted to say, and I should have written this down. Oh yes. Catherine M. Valente, in her Fairyland novels, sort of brings up the idea of a sword or a wand. Actually, both. She talks about both of these things. In some of the books, she talks about characters making magical use of their mother's sword. And it's not a literal sword, but to the characters, it's whatever was most important in their lineage and whatever their actual mother, in the character sense, whatever their mother used to sort of bring her magic into the world. So someone who does a lot of sewing, theirs might be a needle and thread. Someone who does a lot of crocheting, it might be a crochet hook. Someone who is a teacher or a writer, it might be a pen or a pencil. A carpenter, it might be a hammer. It's not everything necessarily that looks like just a straight stick of a wand. An artist, it might be a paintbrush. A makeup artist, your makeup brush. So there's just this idea that the wand is whatever that tool is that channels your energy out into the world, and I really loved that. And in another one of her books in the same series, there was a specific talk about wands in the same way, that an artist might use a pencil that they use for sketching or a brush that they use for painting. That might be their wand, and instead of picking something up and just kind of brandishing it in the air like how we think of as a wand, within those stories she was talking about how a wand is a tool for magic and creation and bringing something into manifestation in the world, and the way that you use the wand has to do with however it's meant to be used. So if your wand is a pencil, the way that you use that magic is by using it to write or draw or to actually, create manifestations of things. If your wand is a screwdriver, I was actually thinking in the building sense, but also, yes, Whovians, you know someone who uses a screwdriver as a wand, and it's actually used in a practical sense. It's used to unscrew things or screw things in. It's used for building and fixing. If your wand is a candle, light it. Things like that. So just that concept, both of a sword and a wand, they're both things for bringing energy out into the world. I just love that idea that it can be really closely affiliated to whatever your personal energy is, whatever your magic is, whatever you do. However your magic manifests, your wand or your sword can look like that and can be used that way. So that's the last thing I wanted to say. As I mentioned, my name is Cara. My other channel, my personal channel, is CuteWitch772. The link is in the description to these videos. Please go and check out my personal channel if you have not already. Let us know in the comments of this week's videos whether you use a wand or an Athame, what you use it for, what your associations are, if you don't use anything like that, if you use something different for a similar purpose, anything like that. Thank you very much for watching, and until next week, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.